Welcome to the Yoga Energy with Katie podcast. I'm your host, Katie O'Byrne. I'm a yoga and Reiki teacher, and I am obsessed with learning. I can't wait to share with you some of the things that we learn here on this podcast. So stay tuned for some weird and wonderful conversations. Welcome to the first episode of season 3 of the Yoga Energy with Katie podcast. If you've never listened to this before, you may not know that I have done tons of other episodes. Well, tons, I say tons, I think 16 or 18 or something like that. And they are already on Spotify. And they may look like they were just uploaded last month, but actually they were recorded 4 years ago. I simply just changed platforms that I was using to host my audio, and it now looks like they're brand new episodes and have no listeners. But they have been on Spotify for the past 4 years, and they've gotten thousands of listens all over the world, which is really interesting. But it's not about that. This podcast is really about trying to connect with people. It's actually, for me, I'm setting a challenge to myself, I suppose, to try and be brave enough to reach out to people I admire and people I am interested in. And also, I really want to challenge myself and see if I can improve on my communication and how I ask questions and how I express myself. At the start of this recording, I had to write the word so up on the whiteboard that's in front of me here to remind myself not to say so in between every sentence. You will hear that in this first episode. I say the word so a lot. And that's a challenge for me to acknowledge the things that I'm saying that are not great or effective communication. The word so is kind of just a filler of space, filler of time, filler just to fill the silence, I suppose. And I want to improve on that. It's something that I think as a yoga teacher, we can constantly improve our communication. We can constantly improve on how we express ourselves, our ideas, how we express the knowledge of yoga, our view on yoga. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm trying to not say the word so. It's very difficult. Anyway, I'm really happy to be back doing this podcast after 4 years. I've had some amazing guests on in the past, and I've learned so much since I first recorded the first, second, and third series. I listened back to a couple of episodes and I was actually a little bit embarrassed about how little I knew about some of the topics, especially when I was speaking to Katie McGuire. I was very interested in what she had to say, but I hadn't a clue what she was talking about in a lot of the topics that we covered. I've since been talking to Kitty and we are going to do another episode together. So that'll be really interesting to compare episodes. Interesting for me anyway. I don't know how interesting it's going to be for you, but interesting for me to see how much I've learned and how much I've grown or how my communication style has changed in the past couple of years. So like I said in the intro, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a Reiki teacher. They're my two main gigs, I suppose. Yoga is at the heart of everything I do. I really genuinely try to live the principles of yoga every day as best I can. I fail a lot, but I try my best. And it's been such a support to me. And hopefully, with some of the conversations that I have with people, especially about yoga, hopefully that can give you some maybe new techniques or some insights into different aspects of your own life. Hopefully, it can show you how to bring these principles into your daily life. Hopefully, it can show you that yoga is so, so much more than a 1 hour experience every week. And what else do I do? Yeah, I also teach Reiki as well, and I practice Reiki. And Reiki has been a really good support for me over the past couple of years. It's helped me to feel more connected to myself. A lot of the same benefits as yoga, to be honest, just in a slightly different way. And I've only recently started teaching Reiki, and I absolutely love it. I love teaching it. I think I really love teaching it because a Reiki level 1 needs to be done over 2 full days. So the training is, I do it over a Saturday and a Sunday, and it's full days. And I love any type of teaching or sharing that gives me that time to go really deep into the subjects. I obviously love doing my regular weekly yoga classes, but I just don't feel there's enough time to share everything I want to share, or to allow people time to really feel the depth of what there is to feel. So I really love the longer trainings. It's been a real privilege to start doing that. And I feel really passionate about it now because for a long time I didn't even know how to explain Reiki, if I'm honest. People will be like, "Oh, what is Reiki? Is it like a massage?" I'm like, "No, it's not a massage. It's kind of not a massage, but kind of a relaxation. Kind of, I place my hands in different places." And I just used to say, "Oh, you know what? You just have to experience it." But now I understand it a lot more, and I feel very comfortable in sharing what it is. Obviously, if I'm teaching it, I'd want to, but that moment where I felt that I could express this is what Reiki is. Reiki to me is a relaxation and meditation technique that helps us to look inwards and connect to ourselves. And when we can look inwards and allow our mind to become quieter and to become really aware of the body and the subtle energies, and even become aware of the thoughts in the mind, we can then start to bring more balance back within ourselves. And as a Reiki practitioner, I can give you the time and the space to help you do that. I create a space where you can lie down, and I tune into your subtle energy system, and I help you to do the same. And by me placing my hands on different places over your body, or sometimes just hovering my hands over your body, depending on what you're comfortable with, I'm able to help you become aware of different things that you may be holding onto in your body, like stress or tension or even trauma, and becoming aware of those things, and then subtly and in a calm, relaxed way, being able to let go of them in order to bring balance back into the body, mind, spirit. That is a very, very quick synopsis of what Reiki is. There's so much more to it. Like I said, it's a 2 day course. But yeah, I really enjoy teaching it, and I've definitely like rekindled my love of Reiki. So that's a little bit about what I do. I do lots of other things as well. I have the Anu Rising journal and ritual box, which is all part of my menstrual cycle awareness work. I also work as a special needs assistant in a special needs school, which I absolutely love. That's a really big part of my life that I never thought would be something that I would do. I never thought I could do something like that, but I absolutely love it. So that's a little bit about me. And hopefully, over the next number of episodes, however many I decide to do, I don't have a massive plan for this. I don't have lots of structure around it. I am going with the flow. I felt like it was the right time to start the episodes up again. I felt like the people that I talk to are the right people to talk to. I don't have a business plan around this. I don't have lots of intentions around it. I am really trying to just use my intuition on it and see what happens. And hopefully you enjoy it. And over the course of whatever amount of episodes I do, hopefully you'll get to know me a little bit more, and you can maybe start to engage with the podcast, start to engage with the Instagram page, and maybe something big will grow out of this, and maybe it won't, and that's fine too. So if you would like to get in touch, you can find me online. Everything is pretty much Yoga Energy with Katie. The website is yogaenergywithkatie.com, Instagram, YouTube, all those places, Yoga Energy, or under Katie O'Byrne. You can check out the website to see what I have coming up, all my classes, my trainings, my retreats, all the different things that I have going on. I do have a Reiki Level 1 training coming up on the 13th and 14th of June. This is the last Level 1 training I will be doing probably before October, November. So if you feel drawn to starting your Reiki journey, this might be a really nice place for you to start. And I will be looking at doing a Level 2 after the summer as well. And if you are joining me from a different part of the world, you can join my online yoga classes every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Irish time. Maybe it won't, and that's fine too. Here is the first episode with Darian So, a good friend of mine, who we did our 300-hour yoga teacher training together in Rishikesh last August. And we talk about everything from her time in China during COVID and during big restrictions and big lockdowns, and how she met her husband, and her interest in the Chinese culture and Chinese medicine and herbalism, and her recent training as a doula. We also talk about how she moved from Kansas to China, traveled to India, and is now living back on the west coast of America. I really hope, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this episode. This episode is the two of us just talking so naturally, like we did every day for 6 weeks on our training. And she's a wonderful woman, and I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Here with Darian. Darian So is your new name.
Yes.
So Darian is herbalist, a yoga teacher, sound healer, and you're training to be a pregnancy doula as well. We met in Rishikesh Yoga Peat last August, and I think we became friends really quickly. Me, you, and Eva were like the three amigos there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we got really close over a training, and yeah, this is the first time that we've properly spoken since then. So we probably have a lot to talk about. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm so happy you decided to do it. Because yeah, it would be a nice way just to connect with you again and see what's going on. So I guess, yeah, like I don't want to structure any questions too much. I just want to be more of a general chat. But I suppose, what are you doing at the moment? Do you want to maybe start with what's most recent for you with the doula training, or?
Yeah. So like you said, we met in India, and since my yoga training in India, I have moved back to the US. I got married, and now I'm training to be a doula and prenatal yoga teacher. So that's kind of like the new adventure that I'm having now. I'm in an 85-hour YTT for the prenatal yoga. And yeah, since India, my life has kind of been just like a big whirlwind of things. Leaving China and then doing the yoga teacher training in India and now back in the US. It's been a lot to settle into, I guess.
I'm sure. Yeah, because when we were in India, like you were going through there was a lot of things happening for you, and like everything was changing. You didn't really know what was next. So let's go back to what I consider the start anyway. I'm sure there's more before this, but like a lot of your like a really interesting part, I think, is when you decided to move to China.
Yeah.
When did you make that move?
So I decided to move to China right after finishing my bachelor's degree in 2019. So I was 22, and I have a degree in English. So I figured, okay, where am I going to go with this? What am I going to do with this? I could already speak a little bit of Spanish. So I decided I didn't want to go to a Spanish speaking country. I wanted to go somewhere completely different, somewhere I'd never been before. Um, so I just blasted my resume out to a bunch of different countries, South America, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, China, Japan, and China was just the one that I chose.
Mm.
So yeah, I flew out to China, and that was December of 2019, so like about 2 months before COVID hit. And so I was very fresh and new in China at that point. And then I decided to just stick it out, ride the wave of COVID over there. And I ended up being there for 4 years. So yeah.
Yeah. And that must have been like, I don't even know what word to put on it, but just landing there 2 months before a major pandemic.
Yeah.
And I mean, China was kind of the hub of so much. There was
Yeah.
a lot going on there. The lockdown seemed quite intense.
Yeah.
And
So
I
we were,
assume
yeah.
not knowing many people when you know, you'd only been there 2 months. Like, how was that? How did you cope with all that?
Yeah. So I didn't know really anyone. At that point, I had spent a month in Beijing for training with my company, the school that I was teaching English for. And so I had only been in the city that I lived in for about 4 weeks. Then I left to go on Chinese New Year holiday, which lasts for a few weeks. So I was traveling through Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand when COVID really broke out. And I think at that time, I didn't, obviously, no one really knew what this was or how big it was going to be.
Mm,
So when we heard news that there was a virus that had broken out in China, I was worried, but I was like, oh, it'll figure itself out,
mm,
no big deal. And then flights started to get canceled. And then I was like struggling to get back into China to even get to my apartment. And um, that was when I really realized, like, oh man, this is this is real. And
mm,
of course, I had all my family back home calling me, telling me to come back. And when you're 22 and you just do something like this, like moving across the world by yourself, I really had this feeling inside, like in my heart, that I can do this. I don't want to throw
mm,
everything away and go back to Kansas now. I'm already here. I already made it over to Asia. Like, I want to stick it out and I want to see what happens. And that really has been one of the best decisions of my life because,
mm,
of course, COVID was crazy and China's lockdowns were very severe. But I really, yeah, my life, I built my life there, and
mm.
um, I met my husband
Well, that's
there.
what I
And
was going to ask you. So
yeah.
you said about you had that feeling in your heart because I was going to ask you, you decided China and looking back now and after all the experiences that you've had and maybe a little bit more wisdom or whatever, like what do you think it was that drew you to China? Do you think it was pure luck or, was there something calling you to there? Because like you said, you met your husband and,
Mhm.
a lot of things have changed for the better now because you decided to make that move.
Yeah. I am not really one to believe too much in luck. I like to think that everything kind of has its own divine timing, and your instincts lead you to what you're supposed to be doing, even when you don't understand them at the time. So my family had no idea why I wanted to stay over there. They didn't understand, you don't even know what it's like. You just moved. It's so dangerous now because of COVID. Just come back. And I knew in my heart that something was leading me there. And there was a reason why I didn't give up when so many people were giving up. Because
Mm,
in 2020, there was a huge amount of foreigners that left the country because of COVID, which is understandable. They wanted to be back in their home countries, or they couldn't deal with the restrictions or the travel restrictions, things like that. So um, it was at the end of that year that I met my now husband. And there's something so powerful about China as a country, with their traditions and the
mm,
roots of the country that I felt so connected to,
mm,
even though I spoke no Chinese and I can't read Chinese and
mm,
all the food was foreign and strange. And but there's something that's very spiritual about the country, kind of like when you would know being in India. It's those countries that have just really ancient roots that
Hmm.
run throughout the society. Even though China now is such a modern country, they still are very traditional in the way that they do things, especially spiritually.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that was one of the big things that kept me there is that I felt so connected through like learning about their culture and learning their traditions that I was like, oh, this country is so powerful.
But did you have any concept of the culture and the spiritual roots before you went?
Um, when I was in college, I taught foreign exchange students. So I had a couple students that were from China who would tell me, "Oh, you would love it there." They would talk about the food and things like that. But I never knew really. I don't think in the West we don't really see that side of China. We
Mm,
see like how China is now, and then there's like ancient China, right?
mm,
So we don't really get any of that kind of information over in the West, at least not in the US. So no, I didn't really know what to expect, but it's kind of like a feeling once you get there, you know. And many foreigners, they feel very uncomfortable by it. They show up in China and they can't read. The food is really strong and the accents and the people talking, no one speaks English. It's not as westernized as a lot of other countries like
mm,
Thailand, for example, who's a jump away from China, it's right there. But but they don't have the kind of tourism that China doesn't have the same kind of tourism that Thailand has. So some people get really intimidated by that and
mm,
really scared. But for me, I just felt like it was a new adventure. I was almost
mm.
happy that I couldn't understand the language because I wanted to learn. And
Yeah, but
yeah,
there seemed to be like from talking to you while we were in India together, there was always this sense that you were so comfortable there that it was really your home. And the
yeah,
way you spoke about how you just lived your day-to-day life, it always seemed to me like you'd been there much longer than 4 years,
hmm,
almost like you would have had some connection to there before you moved. Like
yeah.
you seemed really, really settled there.
And I was kind of shocked that I did feel that way because I didn't really have a connection at all to China. And I didn't even really research a lot. Maybe I can blame that on being 22 and just having, you know, n not knowing how to plan things correctly. But um, I didn't
But
really
that's amazing though, isn't
research.
it?
Yeah,
Because when you
yeah.
grow older, you're like, oh, I have to,
I have to worry about
think
all this.
safer
And
about things and, you know,
um,
but that's not always a good thing. Because maybe if that opportunity to go to China happened when you were older, maybe you wouldn't have
yeah,
stayed when the pandemic hit. Maybe you would have come, back to your
yeah.
family or whatever.
Yeah, but I made the decision when I moved there that, uh, well, when I was sitting in my apartment during lockdown, when I first moved there and right when the pandemic first hit, I remember feeling kind of nervous because I don't know anybody here. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to call, what to do, right? And I was sitting in my apartment by myself, and I just, in that moment, told myself, I'm gonna forget everything I've ever assumed about China. I'm going to forget anything that I've ever heard people say. I'm going to try to be as integrated into their culture as I can. It's like, I'm going to learn Chinese. I'm going to eat Chinese food. I'm going to celebrate their holidays and I'm going to immerse myself into this culture because this isn't a culture that's built around the West.
Mm.
Like many countries that I've traveled to before, they have English menus or they have um, things in English for people or special menus at restaurants for foreigners and things like that. And I was like, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to look for, a shortcut out of this. I'm going to be like the Chinese as much
Mm,
as I can. I'm going to, wear what they wear. I'm going to eat what they eat. I'm going to try to
mm.
speak the language.
And I'm presuming then that obviously made things a bit easier then for when you did meet your husband, that
Yeah.
you had a sense of his culture and his life.
Yeah, for sure. And in the Chinese culture, not speaking for everyone, but it is very it's a culture of etiquette and hierarchy and social norms. So there are very strong traditions that run through Chinese families, and it's pretty solid across the board that this is what you can do this is what you cannot do,
Mm.
and these are ways to show respect to elders in China, which is very important. Like they're the respect that they have for people older than them, especially their parents and grandparents. Those are things that I feel like we sometimes don't put as much focus on in the US, for example. But like even where to place your chopsticks when you're eating, or how to receive gifts, or when to talk, when not to talk. These were things that I focused on when I was in groups with people. I really wanted to see, and I asked a lot of questions to my coworkers and stuff at the school, that my Chinese coworkers. I asked them, what can you do? What can't you do? You know,
I can imagine
how can I get in the
you.
good graces? How can I,
Yeah, I spent,
and
what is it?
yeah.
I don't know, we were in India 5 or 6 weeks or whatever, and I just spent all that time watching you ask so many questions. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, because you don't know these things unless you
Yeah.
ask. And there's such small details, especially in China. Like when you grab things with two hands instead of one, it seems like such an easy thing to overlook for us, but for Chinese elders in particular, they notice those things, and they can see that you're trying. And that was really big when I met my mother and father-in-law and all of my husband's family. They were so nervous. Of course, they had never seen a foreigner in the village that my husband's mom grew up in. So I was like the first foreigner there. They don't know anything about our culture or my culture. So
Mm.
um, it was it felt like kind of a test, right? The first
Mhm.
dinner I had with them, it's like, is she going to eat everything we give her? Is she going to put her chopsticks in the right place? Is she going to be, picky
Mhm.
about food? And I tried really hard to, and it's not so much as trying to be somebody I'm not, because for me, it felt like I want to respect your culture
Mm.
as much as I can. And in no way does your culture infringe on my culture. So it's
Mm.
not like I was giving up my own practices or my own etiquette to take on that of the Chinese. You know, it was just how it was. Like
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was losing any part of myself. If
Mm.
anything, I felt very proud of myself for learning these things and
Mm.
for making them so normal.
And I just
So,
wonder, you spoke a lot about there seems to be a lot of like attention to detail in how maybe they do like the mundane things.
mhm,
What would you say is a very general question for what you're
mhm.
talking about, but what would you say that's about? Like why all the attention to detail?
So in the Monday things, like what, for example?
You said about where you place your chopsticks. I mean, that's
Oh
not
yeah,
something I would, when I'm eating my dinner, I wouldn't necessarily think about where I
mhm,
put my knife and fork down.
right. I think a lot of this comes from the fact that my fiance, well, I called him my fiance. He was my fiance at the time, my husband now. His family comes from a very spiritual background. So he's from South China in Guangdong province, and he comes from a very Buddhist household. And there's a huge blend with um, Chinese folk religion, or like Chinese mythology,
Mhm.
and Buddhism. So in South China in particular, um, the blending of folk religion and Buddhism lends itself to a lot of superstition and a lot of etiquette and little mundane rules. So with the chopsticks, for example, for us in the West, maybe when you're eating, you can leave your spoon in your bowl, or like you leave the fork on the plate or something like
Mm.
that. In Chinese culture, if you leave your chopsticks in the rice, it looks the same way that they offer incense to the dead. So they offer a bowl of incense with the sticks sticking out of rice.
Yeah.
So if you stick your chopsticks in the rice like that, it just looks, it signifies that kind of
Mm.
burning incense for the dead. So it's disrespectful to stick
Yeah.
your chopsticks in your rice. And yeah, there's just little things like that that we they're so easy to overlook if you don't
Mm.
know to be looking for them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would say that most of these traditions and these little manners, these etiquette rules stem from some sort of mythology or folk religion, or yeah, ancient
Mm.
Chinese religion. Mhm.
Mm. Yeah, because I'm guessing, when, well, obviously when you grow up with it, maybe that does become the mundane. But
Yeah.
to me, it does kind of signify that you're doing everything more with a purpose.
Hmm.
And it's almost like a little ritual. And I
Yeah.
suppose honoring the fact that, or, or kind of acknowledging that everything is sacred almost.
Yeah.
Mm,
And in particular with elders. So these are things that my husband might let slide if it's just him and his friends. But
mm,
there's this sort of respect that comes with your parents, and um, filial piety in China is immense. Like having respect for your parents and your grandparents, your family members. That's kind of like the center of Chinese culture. It revolves around the family and the family dynamic. So yeah, and everything is done very particularly. They always say that China is such a like a logical and analytical culture, and it's really I agree with that. They think things through. They have methods for everything. You know,
mm,
anytime a child asks, "Why do we have to do this?" My Chinese co-teacher, she was so quick, and she just knew this is why we do this. This is why we do this. And a lot of times it comes from respect and having care for things and paying
mm,
attention and
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it?
yeah.
So, okay, so that's a bit about your journey through China. And then I just, what really sticks with me is when you were in India, I remember you saying that, you were going through these phases of like culture shocks. So
Hmm.
you'd obviously moved from Kansas, is that
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
To China. And that was obviously, a very different culture. And then you moved from China and you were in India for, I can't remember, was it 5 or 6 weeks we were there?
We were there for 6 weeks.
6 weeks, yeah. So, quite a bit of time to spend somewhere. So it was obviously that was a culture shock for you as well.
Yeah.
So what would
Yeah.
and you would think that, well, for me, it's like uh India and China are in Asia. So
Hmm.
it feels like you could almost blend them into one, but they're completely different, totally different cultures and
Yeah.
ways of life.
Yeah. I will say there are a lot of similarities though. And I think it's those mega countries, right? Like with
Mm,
huge populations. So China having over 1 billion people, India having over 1 billion people. It's just the culture that comes with having so many people
mm,
in a country. Um, Now that I'm out of China and out of India, now that I'm back in the US, I can see how much similarity they had.
hmm
So, but while
Now
I
that
was
you
in
say that,
India,
I
I
actually
had to
think I
compare.
think I think I'm remembering it wrong. I think I was speaking about the culture shock, and you were actually saying that they were similar. You could see similarities while you were there,
Yeah,
maybe. Maybe I'm
yeah,
remembering it wrong. Yeah, that's what it was.
yeah. So of course, there are differences, but for the most part, China and India, in my experience, of course, they had completely different foods and
Mm,
language and things like that. But the kind of atmosphere that a country gives you with that many people,
mm,
it's similar. It's similar.
mm,
So, of course, the Indian people and the Chinese people were incredibly nice, especially to foreigners.
mm,
They were both very interested in our cultures. They asked us, when we were in Rishikesh, the locals would ask us questions and things like that and
mm,
talk to us. And they were
mm,
just so happy to see foreigners, which is something that being in the US, it makes me feel really nice because living in a country that has such difficulty with acceptance like the US, we're a very diverse country, but we're so, and I won't say for the whole country, obviously, but at some points it can be so racially dividing. And it's
mm,
something that I haven't been used to because I've been away for so many years. But how often people's race gets brought up, how often in the news you see things about race and religion and all of this. When I was in China and India, um, it was such a homogenous country, right? So many
mm,
people in China look Chinese, and so many people in India look Indian.
mm,
Um, that when you go back to a country like the US, and I'm sure Ireland's the same way with so much cultural
Mm.
diversity, I don't know. I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other. It's just interesting to compare the kind of discussions that you hear um, in the East and the West.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And and just coming back to that, maybe you had a similar kind of feeling in your heart, or maybe I'm over exaggerating, but what was it that drew you to going to Rishikesh, and in particular the school that we went to? Like, how did you end up there, you know?
Yeah. So it actually started with being in China and finding Buddhism. And that was a really big transition for me. And it's one thing that really helped me feel at home in China. So having that um, spiritual connection and then finding yoga. So I had always dabbled in yoga when I was in college and high school, but it wasn't until around right before I left for China that I started to do a YTT. And then obviously things got paused because of COVID. And I
Mm.
continued it virtually. Um, it wasn't until then that once I found yoga that I felt more at ease and I felt more confident in managing my stress and managing all of this craziness that was going on in my life because of, living in China and COVID and all of this. And so I was in China for a few years, and my now husband, he's a pro boxer. He wanted to go back to the US with me so that we could do his boxing here in the US. And I decided pretty much last minute that I'm going to go to India and do my 300 hours because I'm already here in Asia. Like, I came to China, I found my love of yoga, and then I'm about to leave Asia. And I felt this last like ditch effort. I was like, okay, it's now or never. I've always dreamed about going to India and to do yoga and all of this. And I'm getting closer to the date that I'm leaving Asia. Like, if I don't do it now, it'll be so much harder in the future when I'm all the way in America. Right
Mm.
now, when I was in Shenzhen, I flew out of Hong Kong and I was in New Delhi in 5 hours.
Mm.
So it's like, I'm not going to have this kind of opportunity again. Kind of how I got to China in the first place. It's one of those like now or never.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I
Yeah.
didn't really research much about India
Mm.
before I left too. So
Yeah. But
yeah.
I definitely think it's one of those things again that like it's not just luck, or it didn't just happen. There's a reason for it. Like I
Yeah.
think like me as well. I've been drawn to there for a reason, and I ended up there
Mhm.
at the time that I did, and all those things.
For sure.
Um, yeah. What was it that what was your highlight? Do you have a highlight from the training, or like what your biggest memories like? Because it was such an amazing time, and it feels like so long ago now. But
Yeah.
for me, there's a few things that stick out, like the hike up to the
Yeah.
ashram. Like that was
Yeah.
just amazing. And like our teachers were
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Um, some of the biggest highlights I have, besides having Eva as a roommate, which was just
Yeah.
Eva was so amazing, and she just has like such a bright energy, and she's
Mm.
just so happy to be alive, and just everything she does is so happy that was really great for me. I was so excited every morning because she's up right out of bed, slinging the curtains open. Wow, Darian, look at this beautiful mountain. Like everything, you know, that kind of energy in the morning. I really miss that because now I feel like I kind of drag myself out of bed. I'm like, man, I
Yeah.
wish I had Eva here to wake me. But
That would be nice.
um, yeah, the things that I think about the most, I think, are the Kriyas.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
about that a lot. I think about like, wow, I can't believe my body did that. Like I was,
Yeah. Have you done any since? Like the
I do
more
gel
extreme
neti,
ones? Yeah, yeah.
but no, I'm kind of nervous to do
Mm,
them because I don't want to mess them up. I feel like I
yeah.
need Dr. Amu there to like guide
Yeah.
me. But no, gel neti is probably the one that I stick to the most.
Mm,
I also miss small things like I miss chai, but like
yeah.
I loved sitting around in the morning, after Natish kills us in yoga class. Before breakfast, we get to sit and drink a chai and just relax. I miss like the views, the monkeys, the mountain, like just the sound of nature up there.
Mm,
It's like such a magical place,
mm,
and I feel so pulled back. Like I want to do another um, training or maybe just go visit or do a
yeah,
retreat or something. I just want to be there.
yeah,
Um, but yeah,
yeah.
I
I
think
definitely
that,
feel I'll be there again, but I don't know when, don't know
yeah,
how, but it will happen. Like it's definitely if it definitely feels like there's something that always calling me back there.
yeah. And I think it is also because there are some people who felt the same way that we do, and of course there's others that don't have that. And when they said that the ashram calls people, I really
Mhm.
believe that. There's some
Yeah,
kind of spirit in that area of the
yeah.
world. Like it is a holy city. It's like this magnificent mountain
Hmm.
and this beautiful ashram, and the teachers there really make it home.
Hmm.
They are so welcoming and so open. Um, yeah, I just feel that place is so beautiful,
Mm.
um, and it's not just the location, right? Because there's locations, beautiful locations everywhere. But I feel like the combination of all of those things mesh so perfectly right in
Yeah.
that makes it so beautiful.
Yeah, but I think like it is aesthetically beautiful. I mean, the
Of
views
course.
are unbelievable, but there is an energy to the place. There's
Hmm.
something, and I feel like that tree in the
Hmm.
middle, just
Yeah.
outside the reception area, like that definitely is like,
It's like the heart. It's like a heartbeat.
yes,
Like it's alive. Yeah,
yes, yeah. There's
for
something,
sure.
yeah. It's undescribable, but there's definitely a beautiful feeling to the place.
Yeah.
Um, like, did you find that your practice has changed since you've done more of the training there, or even just, what changes have you seen in yourself since the training?
Yeah, I think that one thing that has really shifted in me is my perception of what yoga is
Mm,
and why we do yoga.
mm,
So I think that a lot of us go into yoga as a band-aid for something else in our lives. And so I know I was really drawn to yoga because of how lonely I felt or how, nervous or scared I was in China during the lockdown. Um, but it's not made for that in my now that I've, done the YTT and in Rishikesh. It's so much more than that. And
mhm,
it's important, I think, to recognize what draws you to yoga, but then to understand that that is, it's yoga was pulling me somewhere else. It's not to heal my loneliness or to heal my, make me unafraid of things. It's
mm,
to ground myself so that I can be lonely and I can be afraid of things. You know what
mm.
I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
yoga is not going to heal these things in me. It's going to allow me to recognize and maybe detach or understand situations better.
Mm.
So it's not going to fix anything. It's going to help me fix myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
nice. And so one other thing I remember we talked
Mhm.
about was, so after India, you were moving to San Diego.
Yes, I'm in San Diego
Yes.
now.
I'm like trying to get all these cities right. Okay.
Good
We're,
job. You're
we're
remembering
going all
all of
around the
these
world.
things.
So you're in San Diego now. And I
Yeah.
remember you saying, because you had been teaching yoga classes in China.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you'd said that you were kind of like a niche there, the type of yoga that you were doing.
Yeah.
So when you move to San Diego, I know you're a little bit nervous because I'm sure there's
Yeah.
tons of yoga teachers in San Diego. Like I'm sure it's as popular as it is here in Dublin. Like
Hmm.
there's just so many classes. And I
Yeah.
know you were like, oh, how am I gonna, start something off when everyone else is doing it? Like, so how has that gone for you? Are you teaching or did you decide to go another way or what's happening?
Yeah. So I had kind of a sad experience when I first got to San Diego, which does piggyback off of what, like the conversation that we had about my fears of yoga in California. Um, I ended up doing an audition at a yoga studio to be a teacher, and I felt in the moment that this is not what I see as beneficial for the community. This is not the
Mm,
kind of yoga that I want to teach. And I had a really poor experience with like the manager there, and she was just really not kind. And I felt like her idea of yoga wasn't what I was going to be able to produce, and
mm,
what she thought when she thought of a yoga teacher, it wasn't me. Like it wasn't
mm,
what I looked like, it wasn't how I carried myself or how I spoke and things like that. Um, so that kind of discouraged me. And I spent quite a while discussing this with my husband as well. Like, I don't fit in here. I feel like such an outcast. Like, I feel like this yoga that everyone else is doing isn't the kind of yoga that I'm going to teach, and that nobody wants my kind of yoga. And maybe the kind of yoga that I'm teaching isn't um, thought after, or it's not wanted. And then I started to think maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. And, my husband, he's very cut and dry, very analytical. And he was like, listen, you do exactly how you've been doing it. Don't listen to these people. You're going to be fine. And it took a lot of reflecting. And also, what I've realized is when you teach, people will come.
mm,
And if you teach from the heart, that will help you in this field. If you're teaching yoga the way that you think you should be, and I'm teaching it how I was taught in Rishikesh,
mm.
uh, you will attract the kind of people who want your yoga. And I remember you and Eva telling me that in Rishikesh, and all I kept thinking was, yeah, that's easy for you guys to say because you already have like tons of clients, and you already teach classes all the time. And I didn't understand really. But yeah, that talk with my husband had me narrow down my I don't want to call it a niche, but like
Mm.
my scope. Who am I trying to provide for in the community, and
Yeah.
why why am I teaching? And that's
Mm,
what led me to prenatal yoga, um, because I wanted to teach that slower flow, and I wanted to help people who I felt weren't being as represented especially in the San Diego yoga scene.
mhm,
There's um, like what you said that you teach a lot of older people. Like
mm,
most of your clients aren't those, young 20-year-olds.
mm,
So, um, yeah, kind of in that same vein where I was like, I don't want to be competing with people who I don't feel like is my competition. We're not going after the same people. We're not trying to attract the same students to our class. So,
mm,
yeah, I really found interest in prenatal yoga, more of a slow flow, more connection,
mm.
grounding, those kinds of things. So,
Nice, nice. And also, one thing I'll say, not to give advice or not to, but just it brought it up when you were saying about it. Like, I I'm teaching just over 7 years,
mhm,
and it's really only in the last maybe 2 years that I have kind of felt more confident in what I'm doing.
mhm,
And even though I always felt confident, but I don't know, I feel in the last 2 years, I feel more, I don't know, just grounded in what I'm doing.
yeah,
And also, like in terms of like my class has been busy, like
mhm,
I've, and I think every yoga teacher has had this, especially if you're, not in yoga studios. You turn up and like one person shows up or nobody shows up, and
mhm,
you just have to keep reminding yourself why you're doing it. And honestly, in those times where it's been one or two people, like sometimes they have been the most amazing. And I always think
yeah,
there's a reason why there's only one or two people in the class.
mhm,
Um, and now, thankfully, I have like a really good group of regular people who come. There's a, a lovely group of people that are quite regular to my classes, and
mhm,
it just feels steady and um
yeah,
yeah, just rooted. But yeah, it took a long time to get there, and it took a lot of, I don't know if I should be doing this or maybe I should be doing something else. But
yeah,
and I think you feel the same way. It just like I love it so much. I don't want to stop doing it. If it
Yeah,
means I have to have another job or it means that I have to do whatever, like I'll still do it in some capacity because I really, really love doing it. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, and also it's why um I don't I don't teach in studios. I did maybe a couple of classes when I started, but and I didn't have any bad experiences like you did. Everyone was always
yeah,
really supportive,
yeah,
but I don't know what it is. It just never felt right. I always just felt like I should just be doing my own thing.
yeah. But that's after I had that experience, and it was in October. So I was
Mm,
fresh out of the YTT in India. I was
mm,
like energized. I was super, super excited. And I
mm,
had that blow to my confidence right out of the gate. And
yeah.
it took me quite a while to like recover from that, just in the sense of me not comparing myself to other people.
Hmm.
Because in my head I was saying, look, I'm watching their classes, like I can do this. Like why what do they not see in me? Am I not good enough? Am I not, you
Mm,
know, and do I have this wrong with me or this and this and this? And I started to get really negative about myself because I was thinking, why would she do that to me? This doesn't make
mm,
sense. Like, and I don't consider myself like a difficult person to get along with. And so I was like, I thought, I thought you liked me. And then it
mm,
felt really personal. And I took it as like a personal thing. And it took me a while to realize, like, no, it's not personal.
mm,
Whatever she says is not me. That's not,
hmm.
she doesn't know me. So, um, it's just the way things go sometimes. And especially here in South California, like there's a lot of yoga here, a lot of
Mm,
yoga teachers, and a lot of people changing themselves to fit this mold that has been created. That I think
mm.
that is what really pushed me to go somewhere else and like go in a separate direction.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I'm angry about that, what happened,
Mm,
because it taught me so much. Like I'm so thankful that I didn't end up getting hired by a studio like that, or because I
mm.
would have found this out the hard way after I'm already teaching there.
Yeah.
No, I think it was a blessing in disguise, but it's still, it's not nice. It doesn't feel good to
Yeah.
have that kind of stuff, but looking back on it now, I can see why it's
Yeah.
important for those things
Yeah.
to happen.
Especially when you're so excited. You're like, I've just
Yeah.
learned all this stuff. Let me share it with you.
Yeah. And they were like, sorry, that's not what we do here. And I was like, oh man, okay.
And because I'm sure it's probably the same there as it is in a lot of places here. I'm presuming a lot of studios are very asana focused,
Yeah.
maybe not so much mantra, maybe not so much like definitely no Kriya.
Yeah, for sure. It is very asana focused. It's very, I don't know how to describe it without, I don't know. I don't want to say anything like misrepresented at all, but
Mm.
um, there is a sort of spirituality style that they
Mhm.
have, that most of the studios here have, and it's um, this we are really rooted in um, yoga philosophy. And I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. And then when I start to listen to what they consider yoga philosophy, I'm like, whoa, like this isn't what I have been told or what I've been taught. And so it was kind of just like a misalignment in that way. But it's, I don't know, some people call it fake deep. I don't know if I would call it fake deep, but it's very like forced spiritualism is how I would say it, or like constructed spiritualism in the sense it's like they're teaching it, but nobody's following it. It's not, you're not teaching from experience, you're teaching from think you're supposed to be saying. This is
Mhm.
not like not even close. I've met a lot of really beautiful yoga teachers here, um, but
Yeah.
it is a what's it called? Like a generalization that
Mm.
I always heard when I was doing yoga in the East. I
Mm.
heard about these issues and this appropriation and things. And then once I got, I never understood that because I was in China or in India. So I could never see the appropriation or like the forced spiritualism. And then I get here and then I can see it now. And it's unfortunate, but that's just
Mm.
how it is.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And I always find it really difficult to talk about because I feel like when I comment on something like what you were just talking about, I feel like it comes across as if I'm being judgmental or I'm
Yeah,
being like I'm looking down my nose at
yeah,
people and how they practice as in, oh, my spirituality is better than yours.
yeah,
Like that's not the case at all. That's why it's so difficult to talk about.
yeah.
But I do think um yeah, there's a difference.
Hmm.
And not
Especially being a
everybody, we're not going to all find the same yoga
right.
that suit. I mean, yoga is so diverse.
Yeah.
It's different things to different people.
Hmm.
And I think if we're genuinely going to be practicing it, we need to accept that people do it in different ways
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
But also saying that also honoring its
Hmm.
roots and
Hmm.
its deep traditions and finding a way to be really respectful of
Hmm.
this gorgeous practice.
Yeah, and I think that it's difficult too being a Westerner, in particular, being a white woman in this field, where it
Mm,
is very it it's hard to not feel like a hypocrite,
mm,
when you're like, you need to, honor yogic traditions and yoga philosophy. And then I'm, I don't know. It's a weird line to walk where it's like, I don't want to tell people, oh, well, I studied in India, so
mm,
I know what I'm talking about, because that's not fair. There's plenty of people who have, studied and never had the opportunity to leave Kansas, for example,
mm,
or wherever they are. And it's not saying that they're better or worse, or they know more, or don't know, like, you
mm,
know, more or less yoga philosophy. Um, so I've been kind of caught in this catch 22 of like, I feel confident in what I've learned
mm,
in India and my time in India, but I don't want my time in India to be the only thing I have. I don't
mm,
want that to be like, well, I studied there, so I know what I'm talking about.
mm,
And I've found a lot of flaws in myself in this journey since leaving India, where it's like, now I see how our teachers, for example, how they live their lives at the ashram, and how I feel like I should be emulating that in my home life here in the US, and I'm not in some place. Not to, not to say that I'm not doing anything that I've learned, but it's
mm,
hard when I know what I could be doing,
mm.
but I'm not. Or things that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we're
Um,
also just human and we're
human,
always going to
yeah.
mess up and,
So I can't tell
you
anybody
know,
like, oh, well, I studied in India, so I know blah, 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 when
yeah,
I'm not doing some of the stuff that I know I should be
yeah,
doing, you know?
yeah,
But
yeah. No, it is. It's a tricky conversation. And I feel like me and you could have a deeper conversation on it. I'm not quite confident enough to do it publicly
yeah.
because there is a line to walk and I'm tr being conscious of what I'm saying and
Hmm.
um not to offend anybody and
Hmm.
just to be respectful of everybody because everybody's just on their own personal journey.
Yep.
Everybody, I used to have this view that like, oh, yoga shouldn't be done in gyms. Like yoga is a spiritual practice and
Yeah.
it needs to be done in a more sacred space. Like gyms is not suitable. But actually, I know tons of people who started their yoga in a gym and it's worked for them. And then, it's led them on to different aspects of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, yoga in a gym is absolutely an
Yeah.
amazing place to do it because
Yeah.
why not like?
And the accessibility of it too. The fact that this is another topic I think for that I would love to have with you.
Mm.
Um, but maybe not now. Is the idea that,
Let's refine our
yeah,
communication better, and then maybe we'll
yeah,
do another podcast.
yeah. It's the idea that you have to have X, Y, and Z to practice yoga
Mm.
correctly.
Yeah.
And that's really disappointing. You have to be paying X amount of money per month to go to a
Mm,
studio. You have to pay for these courses and you have to have this mat and these clothes and this blah blah blah. And it's really making yoga inaccessible to people. And that's not what yoga is. Yoga
mm,
isn't. And this is a discussion we had as well. I remember in India is with social media and marketing and taking yoga and more of a business
Mm,
when it's a practice, a spiritual practice, or yeah, a practice that we're turning into business. We have to walk
mm,
that line of like not profiting off of the misrepresentation of yoga, but still being able to live as a yoga teacher is a
mm,
huge issue. And I think that that money, once money gets involved, it's when lines start to get blurred of like what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and
mm.
what's yoga and what's not yoga, and what, we can talk
Yeah.
about that different
Yeah.
time. That's a very deep
No, it is.
conversation.
It's a great topic. And I think just on that, it's like I think anyone, you can definitely have a yoga business,
Hmm.
but I do think a yoga business is different to other businesses
Hmm.
because, there are certain ethics
Yeah,
that yoga has that maybe other business practices are not concerned with.
yeah.
So for me, it's always, and not always, because, I mess up as well,
Hmm.
but I try to remember like that the yoga has to kind of come first because
Yeah,
otherwise it's just a business.
yeah, yeah. And it's that, again, that catch 22 of I want to teach yoga because I want to share this knowledge and this experience with people and this
Mhm.
practice with people. And to share it with more people means I have to market myself. I have to promote myself. I have to
Mm,
promote what I do. And
mm,
that comes with it comes with the sticky side of business, like
mm,
I always said, I'm not a business person, I'm a yoga teacher. And it's like, well, if I don't have any students to teach yoga to, then
mm,
I'm not really teaching anyone anything because no one knows I exist or no one knows
mm.
how to come to my classes.
Yeah.
And then you have to make money to keep the lights on, to have people come
Mm,
over to do yoga, and
yeah.
yeah,
And this is a different conversation, again, and I don't have the answer for it, but maybe, yeah, maybe there's different ways of doing it. Maybe we've just been following this business approach.
yeah.
And maybe there's a different way. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there is
Hmm.
one, but yeah, maybe, we all just need to sit down and have a think about, is there another way to do it? Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I knew I
There is
knew
that
we'd get
tangent. I
into
knew
like a
we were
flow
going to
of,
go
yeah,
on.
like giving out about things,
Yeah.
sorting it all out. Um, so yeah, but also, yeah, one other thing I wanted to ask you about is
Hmm.
you are, yeah, really into herbalism and you love your
Yes.
plants and you love your herbs and you
Yes.
always have a little remedy for something. So
Yes.
how did you get into that? Like,
So, traditional Chinese medicine is obviously very, very big in China. They actually don't have medicine readily available the same way that we have it available in the West. So,
mm,
you don't just, maybe in the bigger cities. I mean, I lived in Shanghai, which is like one of the biggest cities in China. And even then, at the pharmacies, they have plant remedies for everything. They have capsules and things like that. And it's pretty much all plant medicine.
mm,
And yeah, the culture of traditional Chinese medicine is so integrated into the modern culture as well that you go and sit down at a restaurant and they serve you hot water because in traditional Chinese medicine, cold water is bad for the body. Um, you'll see like herbal teas at the table when you sit down at a restaurant, and it's just standard practice. And um, Chinese medicine remedies are very prevalent. So while in China, I noticed, I think after my first year, I remember telling my fiance, my now husband, wow, I haven't taken a medication in a year. Like I haven't taken an Advil or an ibuprofen or anything. I haven't taken any um, pharmaceutical medicine in over a year. Like this is awesome. And I started to learn more about Chinese medicine and like what the herbs do. And yeah, that kind of made me think like, wow, this is so beneficial. And I know my family and friends back in Kansas don't know about this stuff. And
mm,
so I started to play around with um, herbalism and making teas and trying them. And then my husband was like, wow, this is really good. Like you should share this with people. So
Mm.
he's always the one that's like, you should go full send and you know. So yeah, I started making tea blends and I had a couple friends who were in kind of like the holistic health field in South China where I lived. And she encouraged me to go do pop-up shops with her. So I was selling
Mm.
my teas and my tinctures and stuff there. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got into that.
Amazing. And you're still selling because you've got your Sun and Spell
Yes.
Etsy shop?
Yes. So I do my herbal tea blends. I'm actually in July. I just got a retreat proposed to me. So this
Mm.
woman, she's running a yoga retreat and she's asking for me to come and teach some herbalist workshops, give
Amazing.
some teas and things. So yeah, Sun and Spell is kind of like my little side project that
Why Sun and Spell? Why the name?
so I always thought of this as like plant magic, right? And I always said that it's nature, but it's magic because
Mm,
when I first came into herbalism, I was like, wow, I had no idea that these plants mixed together could solve these problems or
mm,
assist with these problems. So the sun is kind of like the natural aspect of it, and then spell is like the magical aspect. So I
yeah.
also have a sun tattoo, and
Mm,
my husband always references it. And so then I was like, oh, okay, sun and spell. So it's like
yeah.
nature and magic put together.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
And it is magic. I mean, I think that's where um, you know, like witches came from is like it's just
Yeah.
women, mixing herbs, like
Yeah.
remedying things. And, it kind of got a bit of a negative association, but
Yeah.
witches and magic is just women, you know, making people
Healing
better with,
people.
plants. Yeah.
Yeah. And it really does. It's so empowering. And that's what I
Mm,
really loved about herbalism. It's like you don't have to, of course, there's a line where, some ailments you need to go to a doctor for.
mm,
That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to tell everyone to be afraid of big pharma or be
mm,
afraid of their doctors or anything like that. It's just giving people another choice.
mm,
If you have this problem or this ailment or this disorder, disease, you
mhm,
can you can solve it with this pharmaceutical, or you can also try this. Just try it. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But it's giving people that agency where you don't have to depend on an ibuprofen every time you get a headache. You
mhm,
don't have to do this. There are other possibilities, and it's empowering for people to know that the earth is producing things that can help
mm,
you. Like the earth is here to help you. You're not just like this foreign body on the earth, which
mm,
sometimes we see ourselves as just this destroyer of the earth, and like we're angering the earth, or like the earth is mad at
mm.
us, that's why we have all these problems. But the earth is also giving us so much, and
Yeah.
we just need to know where to look and how to use it. And if that
Mm,
became more common practice, I feel like people would feel a lot more connected to the earth and
mm.
connected to themselves. So that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, yeah. Because I was looking at your shop. What's in your moon cycle herbs? Because I'm always intrigued by anything that has to do with the menstrual cycle.
Yeah, so here, let me grab that. I have all of my herb blends written out so that I don't forget what they
Yeah.
are, because I have a lot of them. On my Etsy shop, I don't have many currently, but I'm doing a big restock this weekend actually.
Mm,
Um, so let me see here. The point of my moon cycle blend is kind of to assist with typical PMS uh, disorders. So
mhm,
like cramps. Let me see here. Okay. So in the moon cycle blend, we have red raspberry leaf, which is
mm,
very common, especially at the end of pregnancy. So red raspberry leaf is great for uterus health.
mhm,
And um, in there's also lemon and yarrow flower. Yarrow flower is also very anti-inflammatory, things like that, just to help with kind of the crampiness, inflamed,
Mm.
that can happen. I'm trying to compare it to other medications that I've seen, like a Midol. I don't know if you have Midol in Ireland, but
Mm.
Midol is like a common um, pill that people take in
Mhm.
America to alleviate cramping, bloating, upset stomach. Lemon is also really good for upset stomach. We have nettle, another common one for uterine
Mm.
health.
Love my
Passion
nettle tea.
flower, yeah, nettle tea is great.
Mm.
Passion flower, rose. Passion flower is also really good for headaches, things like that. So those are also some symptoms that go along
Mhm.
with um, that time of the month. But
Mm.
I also like to think of this tea as something that you don't have to drink it during that time of the month.
Mm.
And it's not a cure-all, right? It's just a support. It's just
Yeah.
something to help. And this is where people start to become dissatisfied with herbalism, is when they are like, I have this problem. I drank this tea and it didn't cure it. And
Mm.
it's herbalism, just like traditional Chinese medicine, is more of a preventative
Mm.
than it is a cure. So it's the mindset that we have in the West towards medicine, that it's like, I get sick and then I take medicine.
Yeah.
When in traditional Chinese medicine, they work on prevention. So you
Mhm.
drink these things throughout your life to prevent these kinds of discomforts.
Mm.
So that's what the
But also with the
teas are
plants as
for.
well. I love how you're saying about, it doesn't have to be when you're having PMS. Like, but
Hmm.
what I found is with the plants, so with nettle tea, because I
Hmm.
was reading it's really good to like replenish the uterus after your
Hmm.
menstrual phase.
Hmm.
So in terms of like this, our inner seasons are seasons that we connect to the menstrual cycle that connects to like our spring phase, which is when
Hmm.
nettles grow, which is when
Mm.
nettles start to bloom. So it's the spring phase is the season of the nettle. And it's also the time where it's really, really good for our body as well when we're in that inner phase. So just after the menstrual phase, when we start to feel like we're in spring ourselves. So,
Yeah.
there's so much to learn from the plants as well as
Yeah,
them in
exactly.
healing. And, when you have that connection to the earth and, there's so much knowledge in it. Like,
Yeah. And it's so beautiful too because um rose, for example, this is one that I feel like gets overlooked a lot of times. But rose is like really good for your uterus health. It's also good for stress and anxiety,
hmm
which is, I don't know about you, but during that time of the month, um, hormones are heightened. Things You take things more offensively, or you're stressed out about things more easily. Um, and it's it's interesting to me how something so beautiful like a rose,
mm-hmm.
when ingested, can do so much for you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's so beautiful, is you see these plants growing and you see their connection to the earth, and then you're like, oh, I am that as well.
Yeah.
When I take these plants, they're benefiting me as well. Like, we're all connected. Everything's connected.
Mm.
It's really
And
beautiful.
it's funny that you talk about the rose. My friend Celine, she makes these oil blends and she has this beautiful rose oil. So yes, it has these beautiful, like you said, these physical benefits for us and it can connect us to the earth, but it also has like amazing spiritual aspects to it as
Right.
well. So I don't fully understand it, but um she uses these blends and she uses the rose to connect to the energy of Mary Magdalene. And she uses
Hmm.
this in this beautiful, to invoke this feminine energy for our meditation practices and to use
Hmm.
the rose like that. I think, yeah, it has this really calming effect on us and stuff. And just the smell of it is beautiful. And it just brings this really gorgeous feminine energy to us. So it has, yeah, plants are just amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. And um, like you said about when they sprout and when they bloom or when they grow, and comparing that to the cycles of humans and
Mm,
how we tend to gravitate towards these really warm, comforting, woodsy, cinnamony tastes in the wintertime, when it's
mm,
cold and dark. And then you look at when those things are in season and when those things are prevalent, or and then once spring comes around, the kind of things that our bodies are naturally drawn towards are normally the things that are the most beneficial to us.
Yeah.
And, this goes for everything that we ingest. Like, this is why it's so important to eat the fruits that are in season, because when
Mm,
they're in season, they have the most nutrients for us, and it's what our body needs at the time.
mm,
And yeah, it's just so beautiful to see like the symbiosis of the world and us. And we're not, like I said before, we're not just on the earth. We are the earth. We are all a part of this big
yeah.
ecosystem. And yeah, I think herbalism just goes so perfectly with that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Darian, that's amazing. I think I'm just conscious of the time. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much. I
Oh,
think
you're so
we'll
sweet.
leave it there. Do you want to tell people your Instagram pages or about the retreat that you have coming up, or do you want to tell us where
Yeah,
we can
so
find you?
yeah, so I am on Instagram at darianso.yoga, is my Instagram. And my um, herbalist Instagram is Sun and Spell, so at Sun and Spell. And yeah, once I have more updates on retreats and things like that, I'll be sure to let you know.
Yeah.
But I'm super happy that you called me, and I'm just above everything so glad to have had this time to talk with you because I miss you a lot
I
and I
know.
miss
I
all of
miss
our
you
talks
too. I know. We used to have these kind of talks every night.
every day. Yeah. Oh man. Okay, well, thank you so much, Katie.
There it is, episode 1 of season 4, done and dusted. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please remember to subscribe and to review the episode and to share the episode. It would be really, really helpful. Again, you can check me out on yogaenergywithkatie.com, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you all so much for listening. Take care.